find yourself as you mature and experience more of life that you become more afraid of making mistakes? Well, I felt that way. And it's quite common because that's what happens when we've been hurt. And anyone who has taken risks on love and life will get hurt once in a while from time to time. And this is especially true if you find yourself single again or been in this single dating life for a long time. Expect to get hurt and hurt others as well. And we can find ourselves easily becoming fearful of getting hurt in relationships. And we may want to play it safe, not taking risks at all, and waiting for the other person to make the first moves, right? Yeah. And if you've successfully entered into a relationship, you might find yourself increasingly becoming needy, seeking affirmation and reinforcement of their affections for you. You may find yourself even seeking guarantees without realizing it that they won't leave you. Feeling clingy, you might make ultimatums without realizing it, withholding affection or sex as a way to control the other person, rather than using those things as a covenant between you and yourself and God. Fear has a way of expressing itself in sneaky ways, doesn't it? What do I mean by that? Well, fear is an emotion, right? And it's usually something that helps us to protect ourselves. For example, when we touch a hot stove for the first time, we recoil in pain, and that teaches us to not touch a hot stove again, right? Emotional pain is the same way. It acts as the same way. When we've been hurt, we become hesitant to do the same thing again for fear of getting hurt again. So it's a natural response. Where it becomes unhealthy is when, rather than it becoming a discerning tool, we become a fearful, distrustful person. This is not healthy for us. It is good to become discerning, but not such a good thing if we become a distrustful person. Why? Being a distrustful person can stunt our personal growth. In other words, it can prevent us from moving forward by isolating, being overly self-protective. And if this is not addressed, sadly, it can cause us to lose out on enriching relationships that sharpen us and enable us to reach new heights. And you don't want to do that. So if you find yourself becoming more and more distrustful of everyone, fearing disappointment, not making goals for fear of not achieving them or getting hurt, not hoping anymore, fear of being taken advantage of which is something that I experienced, and ultimately fearful of relationships, what can you do? Well, the first important thing to do is to acknowledge that you feel this way and that you've been hurt. Then have grace for the person who is hurt, you, and give yourself time to heal, grieve and heal, rather than denying or brushing it off like it doesn't exist. Second, it is important to learn from the pain. And that may take a little bit of time. Oftentimes, what do we do when we feel hurt? I don't know about you, but I blame the other person. I tend to act like the victim and hold grudges. Now, that person will very well may be to blame, and I may very well have been the victim, but it's important not to stay there for too long. What is important is to move through this so that you can become stronger and healthier. And to do that requires first to be honest with yourself. Take responsibility. So what do I mean by taking responsibility? What I mean is put yourself in the driver's seat. Ask yourself, how do I learn from this pain? What did I play in that experience? Did I trust someone, for example, that did not deserve my trust? Did I do anything to deserve their action? So let me tell you my story because it illustrates exactly my point. After college, that summer, I met Greg, not his real name. my first husband. I did not want to be back home with my parents, and I was jobless. I did not want to be even in the field that I majored in. Go figure. But I think that's a situation that a lot of young folks find themselves in. So I don't think I was unusual in that respect. But all that to say, I felt directionless. So when Greg came into my life, he gave me direction. And so I ignored a lot of the reservations that I felt. And I'll save you the somber details for another time, but 7 years later and 2 children later, I felt devastated with what I perceived to be deep betrayal of my heart, of my trust. I felt betrayed emotionally, financially, physically. I was exhausted. After my divorce, I vowed I would never put myself in that situation again. I vowed that I would focus on my career, never be dependent on anyone again. My fear of making the same mistake paralyzed me from any future relationships. When I was finally ready to look at myself and ask myself what part did I play in that, I realized that I was deeply insecure and that I was extremely vulnerable to someone who can love bomb me and affirm me and feel that deep insecurity that I felt. Basically, this person made me feel special, and I really didn't have to work very hard at being vulnerable. In fact, I felt so insecure that I would invalidate my own feelings. At first, I didn't speak up about his drinking behavior whenever we socialized, and I accepted people's opinions of me, thinking that there's something wrong with me for feeling the way I felt. Not a good way to be. So what did this self-reflection do for me? I learned some very valuable lessons about myself and owned my part. I realized that there were not so great attributes about myself, things that I was not proud of. But the important thing is I learned that I was the only one that had the power to change me. And I had no power to change other people. But I had absolute power to change the things I didn't like about myself. I'm not saying it was easy, but it was possible, and I was able and capable of doing it, and no one else. I became wiser about who to select to date. And I also learned what to do if such a similar situation happened in the future. So I became more confident over time. And finally, I realized that pain goes hand in glove with having a relationship, that it takes courage to be vulnerable. I took responsibility for my future and chose intentionally to be vulnerable again. I became wiser. I learned to trust my intuition. Now, that was not an easy walk by any means, because I learned sometimes my intuition was wrong. So I learned through trial and error to trust and to hone my intuition. Where before I was naive and closet needy, I became wiser and intentionally vulnerable. It was a huge learning curve. In summary, fear is a very sneaky thing, right? It can mask itself in ways that is completely opposite to what it really is. It can come off as disinterest, haughty, falsely compassionate, and falsely confident, which are all things that I did. Fear also likes us to feel like a victim, like we have no control over things, and certainly don't have control over ourselves. And it fills us with the idea that the only that we can control the environment is to control other people, which will drive you batty if you've been through that, down that path. So the next time you feel fear, what do? Ask yourself, is this legitimate fear or a false fear? That will be the first step in taking responsibility of your fear and overcome it with intentionality. If this video has been helpful to you, I hope you take this time to share, like, and subscribe. And please, I would love to hear your comments. Until my next video, I wish you hope and peace.